Fashion changes frequently these days. It was no different in centuries past, but changes were a little slower then, in line with the pace of communication by ship from Europe and England, whose trends Americans tended to follow. In the 1700s, during the reigns of King George I, II, and III, wealthy women wore costumes, as historic fashions are called, of elegant, heavy fabrics. Structural undergarments like stiff corsets and cane side hoops were used to hold out the large skirts. Their hair was piled high in formal styles, often with elaborate decorations made of feathers and jewelry. English nobles, the French court under Marie Antoinette, and wealthy English women in American Southern Plantation Society modeled these fashions. Even the hardworking American colonists in New England wore these Georgian-style garments, though with simpler, less expensive fabrics. And the corsets actually helped support women's backs as they went about the hard work of farming and colonial housekeeping. Toward the turn of the century, George III became very ill. His son George, later George IV, was appointed regent. During this regency period, fashions changed 180 degrees. The elaborate Georgian dresses were replaced with simpler gowns, with high empire waists, long narrow skirts, cleavage, light fabrics, and ribbons. These were the styles of Jane Austen, Josephine, wife of Napoleon, and Dolly Madison. Unfortunately, our museum doesn't have any surviving examples of these costumes. Fashion changed dramatically again with the coronation of Queen Victoria in 1837. Skirts became full again, with petticoats held out by crinoline horsehair frames and bustles in the back. Bodices were V-shaped with round or high necks. Gone was the cleavage in a wave of Victorian modesty and emphasis on family values. Heavy and dark fabrics were the rule until almost the end of the century. The Victorian period was the heyday of the Collins Company. The museum has several examples of costumes of this period. The oldest is a bottle green silk gown with full skirt and puffy sleeves from about 1855. 3 dresses from the 1870s show further examples of the fashion for dark and elaborate outfits with elegant tailoring. One is a heavy broadcloth with fringe and metal trim. Another is a rich burnt orange velvet. And the third is likely a spring or summer garment of very light silk in a subtle black window pane pattern. In America, the dark colors appropriately reflected the nation's mood during and after the disaster of the Civil War. At the turn of the century, the mood lightened, both in England and America. The death of Queen Victoria ushered in the Edwardian era, and women's clothing started to lighten up again. Bloused bodices, trumpet bell-shaped skirts, narrow hobble skirts, and big hats became the fashion. These were the days of the Gibson girl with separates featuring non-matching color jackets and skirts, sometimes with a nod to menswear style tailoring and neckties. Less structured undergarments offered women greater comfort and freedom of movement. The museum has 2 outfits that show off the blouses, tailored jackets, and simpler skirts of this time. The Edwardian era came to an end around 1915 as Europe headed toward the Great War. The trend towards less elaborate and restrictive clothing was timely and continued inevitably as women filled in for men across Europe and America as they went off to fight. Once discarded, the petticoats and bustles of the past have never come back in fashion, but they are fun to look at and imagine what they would have been like to wear on a daily basis.